This is Marketing Uncomplicated. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I'm joined by Doug Brown, the CEO of CEO Sales Strategies and a renowned sales revenue and profit growth expert. Over his incredible career, Doug has founded and built more than 35 businesses, collectively generating over $960 million in sales for himself and his clients. Super amazing. 35 businesses. I can't wait to dive to it. He's known for creating a predictable, reliable, measurable, and math-based model, love models, because they work, for sales revenue growth, helping businesses raise close rates by 143% and increase product sales by over 4,150%. Doug's newest venture, Vibinto, did I pronounce that correctly?
Close, Vibitno.
Vibitno is reshaping how we think about sales automation driving revenue through better follow-up, client retention, and productivity. Client retention is huge, guys. We are lucky to have him with us today to talk about his journey, mindset, and the future of selling smart. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining.
Oh, Sasha, thanks so much for having me here. I'm very grateful.
I love that. I'm going to dig into, I'm curious, what does Vibitno stand for? Because I'm always curious as to how people come up with names for their companies. So let's just start there and then we'll take a step back.
We've actually been thinking of changing the name Vibitno because Americans in particular have a very difficult time talking, saying it, right? It actually is a Slavic term that means you matter.
You got to keep it. I like it.
Oh, thank you.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When people realize what it does, like follow-up really is a common courtesy, and it really does mean that you matter to me.
Yes.
And so I wanted to get youmatter.com, but they wanted such an enormous figure to get that. So I was like, let's find something that sounds a little less American, because car companies, Mustang, Zephyr, they always pull like different names from different cultures. So I found this term and I was like, oh, wow. And then I do a lot of business in Eastern Europe and they completely understand it.
Yeah.
But we don't in the United States as much.
I think you should keep it. I think it rings. And I think that's your why. And that's like the story behind the business, which we'll dig into. So thank you for that explanation. Let's start at the beginning. You built 35 plus businesses. That's a record number. What was the very first business you started and what did you learn?
The very first business I started was a paper route. I was too young to get the paper route. So I started working at the age of 3 for my dad in his business. I literally was sweeping floors for 25 cents a week. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I particularly loved it because I got to hang out with the adults. And for lunch, they would go to this place, a lot of times to this place called the Starboard Gallery. And at the Starboard Gallery, essentially it was a restaurant bar. And they would prop me up on the bar stool and I'd have a little Coca-Cola or something and they'd be drinking a beer or whatever. Yeah. And I just loved it. I don't think my mother loved it. I heard her displeased a few times, but all my brothers, we went through the same process and we learned to sell at that business. But then the power of leverage started clicking in my head early. And I was like, I got to start some business. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I'll get a paper route.
You said the power of leverage, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I love where this is going.
Well, so when we were about 5.5 or 6, it was right around that time, they literally would bring us out to the front counter and help us write orders for customers coming in.
Yeah.
Now, there were 14 employees in the business. So, it wasn't, I can only imagine what my orders look like today. I wish I had an example of one.
You should have saved that. Yeah.
But one day I remember we had a part and I sold the part for $20, but we paid $10 for it. And in my head, I went, wait, we just made $10. Now, at that time, I was getting 25 cents an hour. So in my head, I went, wait a minute, I get $10 all week, working all week, but I just did this in like 8 minutes.
Yeah.
So what if I could do this? And that's how I started thinking about the leverage. And so when it came to the paper route, I couldn't get one because I was too young. You needed to be, I think it was 13. But my brothers were old enough to get one. And so I went to my brothers and I said, would you guys all go get paper routes and I'll run the business and I'll get other kids to deliver the papers and I'll pay you a percentage override on the paper route.
Your older brothers.
Yeah. So I'm 5 years younger than my older brother. And then my oldest brother's 9 years older than I am. So there was like a 5-year gap between my brother Dennis and myself, and David is 9 years older, and then Stephen was in the middle. So they went out and did that, and I had this pretty massive little paper route delivery service going on.
Yeah.
So that was the first business. And what I learned from that is business is super simple until you add people to the mix, because sometimes the kids wouldn't show up to deliver the papers and I had to go out and cover the routes and all of these other things. So you better have a system in the business and, have reliable people. That's what I learned out of that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Would you say then that your deep rooted understanding of sales strategy came from that point in time? Like the understanding of not just selling, but systems and processes? Is that where it really took root?
I think it took root in my dad's business.
Yeah.
Because we would, in that business, every year at the end of the year or the end of a period, you had to do inventory in the company, because if you had inventory on hand, the government taxed the inventory. So I don't like having money go out that I don't deem is supposed to go out, so to speak, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, they tax us on our income, they tax us on this, they tax us on inventory if we don't sell it. Like that didn't sit well with me. So I was like, hey, we've got to get a hold of our inventory system. I mean, I'm only like 6 years old. You're thinking like this. So
that's wild. You must have had a past life sales guru.
I may have. I believe in that process.
Yes.
And, I don't know really where it came from, but I always remember I was kind of that, I wouldn't call it a geeky little kid, but I was just that kid that always like looked at something and said, how do you make this better? And I've been doing this forever. So it'd be like, almost to an obsessive compulsive type process where, if the line isn't straight, we can make it straight, right? That type of thing. Yeah. But that application in business has served a lot of people, including myself, extremely in a beneficial way. So I think that's where it started to take, hold, was back then. And then I just kind of learned one thing after another thing. Out of the 35 plus businesses, they all didn't survive. Like I've had crash and burns. I've had some that had just broken even where, we've worked at it for a year or two and it's just not going.
Yeah.
Then I've had others that have made money. And then I've had a few barn burners that have, been, the success stories that everybody talks about. Right.
But it's almost like there is so much richness, maybe not in the time that it's happening, but there is so much richness in the ones that, as you mentioned, kind of don't make it, crash and burn. Why did it get there? How can we do something better? Wouldn't you say so?
Totally agree with that. In fact, we learn more about building business in the downtimes than we do in the uptimes. And this is a big, big challenge for entrepreneurs and small business owners, especially because, they get into a business thinking, I can do this better than other people, or I have this mission-driven process. But then they run into two things. One, the business of the business. So let's say I have no experience and I go into a roofing business, for example, right?
Yeah.
I have little to no experience except through clients on that. So I would have to learn the business of the business, and that's expensive and it's time consuming.
Yeah.
And so those eat away at the margins. And then if I don't understand how the business of business, then I've got to learn that at the same time. And that's where a lot of, I think, entrepreneurs run into a challenge mode. And, many times when people are like, I'm going to start a business, I'll ask them the questions, do you understand the industry itself? And they'd say, well, I worked for these companies. And I said, well, you have a rounded understanding of the industry. Before you go into business, why don't you understand what it's like to run one of these companies?
Yes.
Right. And so the second thing is do you understand the concept of business? Like money in, money out equals. That equals sign at the end is either a positive, a break even, or a loss. We always want it to be a positive if possible, right?
Yes, yes.
So we've got to run the business by the adherence of the principles, because what I've learned through building businesses, the business doesn't care if I'm not feeling well today. The business doesn't care if I had an emotionally bad moment. The business doesn't care if I'm happy. It's like a newborn child. All it cares about is feed me, change me, love me, do as I ask, right? And then eventually the child grows up and is able to kind of do things on its own, and but you're still always going to be responsible for that child. I remember when I had my first child, an older gentleman, he must have been in his 90s. Rebecca's my oldest daughter, the one you've been communicating with.
Yes.
And she was just little tiny. And I think they call it a bassinet. We carried it around, right? And I went to a meal at a restaurant, a nice restaurant. This older gentleman was just looking at me, and he was looking at Rebecca and looking at me and looking at Rebecca. And I'm like starting to go, wait a minute, pal. It's my daughter. Don't.
Yeah.
And he walks over to me at the after he's done eating. He looks at me, Sasha, and he says these words. He looks down at Rebecca, looks back up at me, and he goes, I want to tell you something, son. I said, what? He said, you're responsible for that thing until the day they put you into a box.
Wow.
And I said, thanks for the tip. And he said, you're welcome. And he walked away.
Yeah.
That's a business. And I'm not trying to turn people away from the idea or dissuade them from that idea. But what I do want them to understand is they are responsible for it on all levels. And so they should learn about all these levels, in particular, finances, how to sell, how to market, all of these things. And then once the business grows up to a point, then leveraging out to other resources, other people who understand that, employees, outsource partners, things like that. But we can't just outsource and delegate out and not stay on top of these things as a small business. Because what ends up happening is, and I think many people can relate to this, I tried this marketing company and all of a sudden $60,000 gone and no response, right? So this is what I've learned these things through the down times. I've lost, I don't even know how much money, but certainly millions and millions and millions of dollars in the down times of business.
Mm-hmm.
And so you learn lessons from that. And if you don't, you'll repeat the mistake. And that's the old definition of insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you for that. That was amazing. But what's even more amazing is the 960 million, like close to $1 billion. I mean, that's like record numbers. I mean, it's massive, right? Was there a moment when you realized you had a formula others didn't? And we'll get into your math-based model, but
Yes.
Tell me when that clicked, like that tipping point, as Malcolm Gladwell talks about.
It was, I would say, this is going to sound kind of maybe strange, but it was only about maybe 5 years ago that I actually realized I had a formula.
Yeah.
Now, when I look back,
you had been moving through that formula. You just hadn't
always.
You just hadn't put it down on paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly what I've been repeating some people know that when I did I was an independent president of training, sales and training for Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes companies. And
amazing.
And I took their presenters. So they ran radio ads into a sales team queue, and then they ran them into a training presenters team. I took that presenters team in the first 4 months, and we went from 17.8% on the close rate to 43.2% on the close rate. And it stayed there for 7 years while I was there. And so, you figure you got 1,000 to 3,000 leads a week flowing through that entity. That's a lot of money that ends up being generated. But I was using the formula back then. Yeah. I just didn't realize I had the formula. So about 5 years ago, I sat down and I was like, wait a minute, I've got all these success stories. I have these, bad things that have happened, good things that have happened. Where's the common thread where all the good stuff happens? And so I sat down and I was like, for 2 days, I literally was going back and forth on, no, this can't be it. No, that might be it. Right. And then I'm going to AI and going, does this make sense? And I'm calling friends. And so we came up with this methodology. And I was like, this is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And this is what I've been doing through time. And so I put it down, and then we're like, we don't know what to name it. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm like, just call it the 2X method. I don't care. Right. It's like, so we named it the 2X method.
And the reason, and what did that, go ahead.
Go ahead. Question?
No, you were about to I was about to ask you the question that you were already diving into, the reason behind why.
Yeah, because there's a concept out there, 10X.
Yes. which we are overly bombarded by today.
Which I wholeheartedly 90% disagree with.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And the reason behind that is it's hard enough to 2x something. Let's, like it's good. I'll probably get hate mail from this, but to me, it's puffery and it's
Yes.
one of those things that it's just like braggadocious.
Yes.
Right. Now, literally, I have taken companies and got that type of growth out of them, but it's not normal and it's not average. And so I'd like to talk about what the average person can actually achieve. And I always do it this way. Like if somebody can bench press 100 pounds, we're not going to walk in tomorrow morning and load up 1,000 pounds on the bar and then say, go at it, kid.
Yeah,
right? Because
totally.
that bar is going to come crashing down on them immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. He's constantly saying, just add a little bit of weight, right?
Yeah.
And so with that concept, if you just add a little bit of weight, get a little bit stronger, if you get 1% stronger every single day, in theory, mathematically, 70 days later, you'll be twice as strong.
Yeah.
Right? So I look at it and say, okay, if I can get you twice as strong over a period of time, maybe it's not 70 days, maybe it's a year, you're still twice as good as you were. But if you do a 1% compounding over a year, you're like 37x. So that's where we came up with the name and why we came up with the name that way, because I wanted it to be something that people could actually do. Here's what I've learned through years. Most people do not want to double their sales. It's a nice concept, but they don't want to do it.
You mean like emotionally and psychologically they don't? Because
well, most of us want more money, if the money was there, but they don't want to do what's necessary to actually double the sales in that business.
Yep. Yep.
What they do want is predictable growth. And that's where the methodology works out great because it's mathematical, it's metrics based, and the math doesn't lie, as it's said, right? So that's where the methodology works. And that's why we named it the 2X. We may change the name down the line. I've tried different marketing pitches on this, being from a marketing background. And unpredictable revenue, it resonates with people, but it's not strong enough to draw them in like I would like. But I went back to that because Chet Holmes, when I worked with him, we did the W sales method. We did the double your sales. That's all we talked about. And that drew people in.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason the name came about that way. And it is really a sensible, practical way of predictably growing the revenue in a company.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And thank you for bringing up this jargon that not only marketers or folks in sales are really hearing about, but it's the concept of that who is really getting bombarded with that. And that is the business owners. And, it sounds catchy, but it's like, what is actually behind that? And is that actually accurate? Right. And I love that you bring in the whole concept of, people want to make more money, but they don't necessarily want to put the work in. And sometimes they could be standing in their own way as business owners to get to that point and not have that realization. So I think that's really important as well.
One of the components of the process is constantly elevating our thought process.
Yeah.
Right. Because if we don't, just as you said, they will stand in their own way.
Yes.
And they may not even know they're doing it.
Yes.
That's what I've experienced over the years. Even with myself, sometimes I'm like, why isn't this working? And then a friend of mine will say, well, did you try this? And I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. And they go, well, that's why it's not working.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. So let's dive into this math model or the math-based model for the revenue growth that we're talking about. What does a predictable, I like this formula. And I think any type of formula works because it doesn't necessarily just also help to click with your clients, but it also helps to create a well-oiled machine internally on the back end for your company. So This is why I love it, right? So let's talk about, what does predictable, reliable, measurable, math-based model actually look like in action? And how are you guys kind of like, give us, how you kind of onboard in a client and bring them through that process?
Okay, great. Yeah, so firstly, it's not that sexy, I'll tell everybody, right?
Yeah.
So
it doesn't need to be,
but it works.
Yes.
Right?
Sometimes unsexy and as in marketing, the not good looking creative is what actually performs. So
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I remember Gary Halbert saying that one day, a
yeah,
copywriter.
ugly works.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first place we start with everyone is, what is your truthful goal?
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, most people don't have a truthful goal. They got a goal that's like this: I want to do this, pie in the sky. And it's like, okay, so what is the actual goal? Once we understand what that is, then what we say is we got to apply numbers to that goal, so that we have to figure out what we've got to do to achieve that goal in the terms of numbers of sales. So I'll give you an example. Most people, let's say they want to grow by $1 million. It's not uncommon to hear that. I want to grow by at least $1 million. Okay, great. So you look at all the parameters, and then what they always forget, always, Sasha, is they forget what's their refund rate, what's their churn rate, what's their not fully refund, but something comes back, and they don't look at those numbers. So let's say that is 35%, for example, and they figured they had to do 100 sales to hit that $1 million. Well, now they need to do 135.
Yeah.
So we get very clear on the numbers, and then what we figure out is what key point indicators or KPIs, that people call these things KPIs. I call them metrics. What metrics do we need to measure? And importantly, what sub-metrics do we want to measure?
Yeah.
So let's say I'll give some easy ones so people can relate to them. Somebody who's selling, you want your sales team to perform better. You're going to look at how many outbound connections are they making? And so that means whether the lead comes in, they're reaching out to that lead and connecting with them. How many times are we doing that? What's the connection rate? So why would we want to know the connection rate? Well, the connection rate will tell us a story. If we have inbound leads and they're reaching out and the connection rate's low, that means either they're not really efficient at doing that as a salesperson, or maybe our messaging really isn't attracting the people that are qualified leads or quality leads, right? So we're going to measure that. We're going to measure our response rate. We're going to measure that response rate to how many appointments we're getting, how many appointments we're getting to how many closes we're getting, how many closes we're getting to how many follow-up closes we're getting, how many follow-up closes to how many expansions of the sale have we done, how many buying frequency increase, how many times are we getting a second sale, if you will. And all from the same interaction, we're measuring these. How many referrals are we spawning out of that? New clients are coming out of that. All of these metrics along the way, and there's usually about 11 of them for the salesperson. We're tracking those every single day, every single week. And we do that because that tells us a story. That shows us where we can adjust. So let's say, for example, we're getting a lot of appointments. Person's really, really good at setting appointments, but their close rate is like, well, what does that tell you? There's a problem there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So this gives us data to go in to look at what is actually happening. Or let's say they're really good at closing the sale, but their follow-up closes are very low. But you look at other team members, and the other team members, their follow-up rate is twice what it is on the other person. What does that tell you? Either their follow-up is very bad, or they're not doing it at all, which is probably the case. So I'm working with a company right now that they wanted to sell a particular item, and their sales team was barely focused on it. But tracking these metrics, I could see it clearly. And I'm like, so I went back to the sales team. I'm like, how often are you pitching this? And they're like, well, we do it this way. And I said, I've listened to the calls. How often are you pitching this? And they went, oh, we're caught. And that was funny because that just happened the other day. And yesterday they ended up selling 30% more of that same product that they never sold for the last 6 months, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the power in measuring these metrics. So as we're measuring these KPIs and these metrics along the way, we're consistently looking for stories within.
Yes.
When we look for those stories, we're optimizing what needs to be optimized throughout the process. So that's the measurement and metric side. Now, to kick up the storm a little bit, we now have to go and say, okay, we have to actually have more outbound touches in most cases. So what do? Go back to marketing or go to prospecting, right? We're now going to create 6 new ways over the next 6 to 12 months that we're going to test to get new incoming business coming into the business. 6 is a very important number. I've tried it with 2 or 3. Doesn't work as well. 6 seems to be the magic number for everybody because out of those 6, you know as well as I do, some of them will work extremely well. A couple of them will work. But what you're consistently doing is you're every month, you're measuring and rating these methods and adjusting these methods. And after a period of time,
test and learn process.
Exactly. Right. Just like just like in marketing. So if you're prospecting as a salesperson, same thing, same rules apply. And if we can't get them, J. Conrad Levinson taught me this back from Guerrilla Marketing.
And who is he, just so that the audience is familiar?
Guerrilla Marketing. He wrote a book series called Guerrilla Marketing. Yep. And I helped Jay in his business. That's how I met Chet. He introduced me. So Jay always told me, Doug, grade them A through F.
Yes.
And so I said, well, you do that on big companies? He's like, Doug, I invented the Marlboro Man and the Pillsbury Doughboy. Trust me, this works.
Yeah.
And so you grade them A through F. You only keep A's and B's. If you can't within a 90-day period make it work to an A or B, you get rid of it and replace it. Mm-hmm. And this is why you want 6 new ones over 12 months.
Okay.
Because
makes perfect sense.
Yes, I agree. Not to be arrogant or braggadocious, but I've measured all this stuff, right?
And it works. Clearly.
Yeah. If I can get the average person to do 6 new methods that are A's and B's over the next 12 months, their business just goes boop, because there's so much. It's and what's great about that, Sasha, too, is their mindset starts to shift. So many people, like, they come into a sales situation and they're like, I got to close the sale because I need the sale. I got to close it. I don't have enough leads coming through the door. So they get really needy. And I teach them to detach from that process because when we detach,
there's the energy of desperation.
Correct. And people sense it.
Yes.
It's like, I've had friends of mine who, are looking for a significant other or whatever, right? And they're approaching a lady or whatever, and they're going in with desperation. And I'm like, dude, stop, detach, right? As soon as they detach
on the outcome.
Exactly. Right? Not on being a good guy or not on doing the right thing, playing win-win-win.
Yeah. But
detach from the outcome. It always works. And so in selling, the same thing works. I have always sold, and this is when I was sitting down, I was like, when were we selling the most?
Yeah.
When we were detached. So why weren't we detached? Because we didn't have enough coming in, so we were getting a little needy.
Yes.
Right? And so 6 new methods each and every single month. Now we're doing continuous training on conversational selling. That means they're playing win-win-win. And how often do you train? I like 4 days a week. People think I'm crazy, but I like training a sales team 4 times a week, or, an individual 4 times a week. Now,
is this upon sort of onboarding, or is this ongoing?
Ongoing.
Okay.
Ongoing. And the reason it's ongoing is because people just by nature get complacent.
So are they then just selling 1 time a week?
No. You're only talking about 15 to 30 minutes a day.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Got it.
So prior to
complacency,
prior to our interview here, I just did a training with a company. We spent 27 minutes and we went through how to create yes states through the flow of a conversation, right? And we've been working on this for 2 days and we just keep doing it. And so here's what happens. Again, go back to the compounding metrics, right? The compounding math. If I can get them better, let's say it's not 1% better a day, but I can get them 0.1% better a day. And we do this for a year. Instead of 37x, they're going to be 3.7 times better.
Yeah.
What do you think happens to a sales team's level of improvement if they're almost 3 to 4 times better than they were the year before?
I mean, the mental shift is 10x.
Exactly, because there's how you get your 10x. You get the compounding interest, right? So we're training consistently, even if they're top producers, because top producers want to get a little bit better, because they want that edge. And so we have to create this consistency of training throughout the week for people. It's like we brush our teeth naturally hopefully we brush our teeth naturally every single day. We don't think about it. You just pick up the toothpaste, maybe I want a new toothbrush, whatever. But that's what we do. Now, imagine if the whole world went to the gym every single day just for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot of the health issues we have are probably not going to be as big as they are today, right? But when you look at a gym, January, it's full. February up till about the 20th, it's full. And then it starts peeling off. By mid-March, you can get a treadmill, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what happens to us as human beings. So if we own a business, that means we've got to be in a constant training growth process. So if I'm a solo entrepreneur, I better be in there learning how to sell better. I better be in there learning how to market better. I better be in there learning how to follow up better. So conversational selling and then into follow-up. Now we've automated the personalized and stuff. We built the technology for it. But follow-up is a key point that people miss out on. I have seen companies literally go from a low of 5% to 20% in revenue just on consistent follow-up. So we build follow-up into the whole process of the play. And then we're also working on the mindset of the individual on a consistent basis, because we all come through, when we grow older, we're just children in bigger bodies, and we carry those childhood wounds that we had all the way through life unless we actually address those things.
Yep.
And it's amazing when you address those things, what happens to your sales. I'll illustrate it on the insane side of the prize, because people like those numbers. I had one salesperson in a company. He went from $140,000 in commissions to $2.1 million in commissions in his first year. And what he told me, because we do this exercise, what he told me is, Doug, I didn't realize I was a liar. I'm lying to everybody. I'm lying to my clients. I'm lying to my fiance. I'm lying to my mom. I'm lying to myself. I'm lying. And the moment he realized that, he's like, and we got it to be able to shift, that he went from playing win-lose to win-win. All of a sudden, the same clients, his sales went up.
Yeah.
So there's these little trigger levels that go along throughout the process. But that's primarily the system that we're working through. And we've got to have an oversight on this, consistently looking at it. And it's a constant training process.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, totally. There's so many nuggets in there to unpack, but that was amazingly said, and thank you for that. And yeah, I mean that whole 6 piece is going to be imprinted in my mind, because I think that the psychology behind everything that you're doing can almost be implemented in essence to a lot of different processes put in place. So the 143% in terms of company increase, their close rates. What have you found? There are 2 questions I want to ask about, the client side. What have you found is the biggest barrier that's holding a sales team back? And to your point, it could be mindset, it could be results, it could be, all of that, which in fold, I want to know what's a client's win you're especially proud of, because it may have been a client that was a challenge for you to work for that had an amazing income, or it may have been a client that was doing good but then doubled themselves throughout the process. But maybe there's a through line to the barriers.
Yeah, there's so the 2 questions that I got out of that was what kind of holds up sales?
Yes.
And the second one is, what's a great client win?
Yes.
Did I get them both? Okay. So what usually holds up sales is, it's usually, owners are not going to like this.
Yeah.
It's usually leadership from the top issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a known fact. Whether they like it or not, they know it.
Yeah. And to their credit, it's hard running a business if you're the solo person at the top and you're responsible for doing everything. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we've got to have training and accountability and management of that process. Because if we don't have training, accountability, and adherence to the process, then what happens is people, just by nature, they just go and do what they think they're supposed to do. So there has to be that direction from the top. And that means that the leader, him or herself, also needs to step up and do the same thing. And so the greatest wins have come out of when that leader will actually do this and hold the teams accountable, responsible for doing this. And so how do we do this? We have weekly meetings with each department, let's say, and they're responsible for their own metrics, right? They're responsible to start measuring these things within their own, because we can go through each, and we go through, let's say, customer service. We turn customer service into a sales division. All of a sudden, you're going to sell more. And if anybody wants a great example of that, just call GoDaddy. You cannot get off the phone without buying something from GoDaddy. It's impossible.
Yeah.
If you're a client, right? They do a great job at it. And so, but what about operations? You mean operations can actually sell more? Of course they can. They're the ones dealing with the client, right? I've worked with a lot of training companies, and they say, well, they're just coaches. That's the operations department, really, when it comes down to the delivery, right? Yeah. And I'm like, they're your best source of client upsells, referrals, all these things. So you can look at each department or division of your organization, and you can apply that same premise to it, but it's got to come from the top. It's got to come, and it's got to be accountable. It's got to be consistent. And when I mean accountable, you just don't train people and go, okay, that was good training, everybody. Hey, have a good day, right? No. Homework. Turn your homework in by the end of the day or first thing by the morning. Tomorrow, we're going to cover this, read up on that, right? So it's just a matter in bite-sized pieces, not like this, we're going to do this whole war and peace training program, right?
Yeah.
So those of you who never read War and Peace, it's a big, thick book.
Like 1,000 pages long.
Yes. And, so I had a lot of great success stories. So I'm going to pick some that I think are more meaningful to me. That may not be like this grandiose, like, hey, like I can tell people I've worked, Intuit. Intuit was losing $7 million a year. No, losing $10 million a year on a $100 million division. And we got them from a $10 million loss to a $7 million gain in 1 year.
Yeah.
So Intuit, pretty big name, grandiose. But to me, the biggest wins come from when I see people individually growing. Mm-hmm. Like the guy who went from 140,000 to 2.1 million.
I love that.
Changed his whole world.
Yeah.
Right. He was living in a 1-bedroom apartment before that. And then he bought on the 23rd floor of a high-rise building in the middle of London. It's like 4-bedroom suite, right?
Yeah. And
it just changed this whole world of not just financially, but he was more confident.
It was a shift.
Yeah. I've had people say to me, like, I used to worry about going and how much I was going to pay for gasoline. I'd drive across the town, to save 10 cents a gallon. Now I don't, right? I go into restaurants. I don't worry about what I pay. All of that worry and fear stuff that goes away when people have more consistency in their income. To me, that's a bigger win than taking Intuit for a $17 million swing. Now, I've helped companies go from 48 million to 110 million. I've helped CBS Television, Procter & Gamble, Enterprise Rent, all these names. But to me, the biggest wins are the ones where people actually are affected the most. And so, have you ever heard of the Ask Method company? Some people may or may not. Okay. So a guy named Ryan Levesque and Richard Cousins and Tylene Levesque built this company. It's a marketing company. When I first started with them, they were doing a few $1 million, and we grew from that to over $20 million. And I built the sales team for that.
Yes.
I went to one of the live events one time, and while I was at a live event, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, brother." And he gave me a big hug. And the next thing I feel is 2 little hugs on my legs and another lady hug around the other side of me. And so there's 4 people hugging me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What's up?" and he said this to me. He goes, "Hey,
wow,
I want to tell you this." He said, "You remember me?" I said, "Yeah, we had a pretty difficult conversation." And he said, "Yeah, but I took everything that you said to do and I applied it. Here's what I didn't tell you at the time of our conversation."
Yes.
I was estranged from my wife, and my children I was no longer able to see them. My business partner and I were 3 months from going bankrupt. He's just telling me, it was almost living on the street.
Yeah.
And he said,
this is you or him telling you about his business?
This is him telling me about this. And he said, "I didn't like you." at the time you talked to me.
Yeah.
But he said, I knew you told me something that I needed to do, so I did go do it. And within 6 months, everything started turning. By a year, I had my family back, my kids back. We more than doubled our business over the last 12 months. So now it's been almost a year and a half. And he's like, we're financially sound again. Everything's going on. And he said, thank you. To me, that's a huge win.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Right? So if we can
Sometimes
do
it's not the monetary.
no, because here's the thing. As I get older, Sasha, the
Yeah.
thing I realize is money's nice,
Yeah.
but it's a tool
Yeah. And yes, but changing somebody's life.
and their legacy.
Yeah. Is
Because
even more.
if their kids grew up without a father, they don't have the support of the two-parent household, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
I don't know how single moms do it. Like crazy to me. And I bow at their feet. But why are we getting into business in the first place?
Yeah.
Most of us get into business to make money and help somebody, but we forget about the component of helping people because we get so caught up in being lack of this or lack of that, that we just get kind of pulls from us. And what ends up happening is if we don't do this right, we build the business on us.
Yeah.
On our back, especially small businesses. They do this all the time. And that doesn't have to happen. But it does happen. And, when it does happen, it's awful because now you basically got a business that doesn't care about us demanding all these things. And we can start to resent the business itself. Or worse, we go in there every single day and we do the same things, like staying in a bad relationship for, you're not supposed to be in this particular relationship, but one stays in it for 20 years and then 20 years goes by, and I don't know, something COVID happens and it wipes the business out and you're like, why didn't I get out of this 17 years ago? Right? That type of thing. Well, you can't get back those 17 years. So to me, every single day is precious.
Yes.
And so if we can affect the people in our lives on a consistent basis while making more money, not, pirating off them, but profiting off their efforts and they can profit off it the same way.
Yeah.
That's what business to me is about.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That again, I mean, you're dropping so many good nuggets all over the place. This is amazing. I do want to get into the binto, the bit no. It's like they say it 3 times and you got it. Vibitno.
Yes.
So let's talk about what inspired you to create Vibitno.
A long time ago, I was working for a corporation and I was doing extremely well. I was the number one guy out of 300 and some salespeople there. I wanted to take a vacation.
Yeah.
So I took Rebecca with me and we went to Florida. I took her to Disney and we had a great time, right? But she also got sick while she was there and we ended up having to go to the hospital and then she had to be on medication. She couldn't fly for 3 days.
Yeah.
So I called back and I said, hey guys, I can't make it back. My daughter's sick. Don't worry. We love you. We'll cover everything. We'll cover your calls, your mail, your email. We got you. Great. Get back 3 days later. I get to my desk. My mail is stuffed full. My email is past capacity. My voicemail will not even, when you used to have a blinky light on the voicemail?
Yes.
It's solid. Anyways, long story short, I get a few calls. Doug, hey, come on over here. I want to buy something from you. Awesome. One guy's name is Jerry. He's like, Doug, I got to buy something from you. Great. Write it down. Next thing, beep. Doug, where are you? I've been calling you for 2 days. Beep. Next thing, Doug, listen, my CEO is pressuring me to make this deal. Give me a call. I'm like, beep. Doug, where the hell are you? I mean, literally, that was the voicemail.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no. I picked the phone up. I called Jerry. I go, Jerry, listen, I'm sorry. This is what happened. He goes, geez, I'm sorry it happened to you. I said, Jerry, I'll be right over. I was 12-minute drive from Jerry's location. And he goes, Doug, come on over. We can have a cup of coffee. You can do this, but we can't do the deal. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I signed with, and I said, who? He said, Lightship. I said, Jerry, when was Lightship in this deal? We've been working on this for 3 months. Yeah. He goes, they cold called me about 5 days ago. My CEO was pressuring me. He told me one morning, get this done now. So I did. My commission loss was $25,000. My vacation was $4,000. So it cost me $29,000 to go to Disney. So I call a friend of mine, Michael.
Yeah.
And I said, Michael, this just happened to me. He goes, damn it, Doug, 3 times in the last 2 months, this has happened to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so we started talking about the problem and we were like, we got to fix this. That's how Vibitno was born. We went to a Panera Bread, sat down on the back of a napkin and drew it all out.
Yeah.
And that's how it was born. And so that's how it's here.
So wonderful story. Let's talk about, the craze of like AI and automation and how Vibitno stands apart from that.
Yeah. Well, we use AI in Vibitno as well.
Yes.
And here's the thing about AI. A lot of people fear it. I love it because it's it's a new technology, but it's not a new technology. It's just in Vibitno, we were automating.
AI has been around for a while, just
for a long time.
The folks that, aren't necessarily involved in like tools like us marketers are and so on and so forth, they think that the age of AI was born when ChatGPT came into.
Yeah, no. I think it was in the 1940s that it was actually the first use of it.
Yes.
And the thing about, we used to do things through workflow, through structured processes in software before, right? Like if this would come in, like, some people know this comes in, an autoresponder would go out, right? That was kind of an automated tool. Well, the thing is that AI now can recognize much more than just sending out a routine email.
The intelligence of AI is what is booming.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like in Vibitno, for example, we have incorporated, and we did this from day one, before AI was even prevalent, which is we track all the persona fields in the process. So now all the persona fields, what do they like? What do they not like? Where did they go to school? How many kids do they have? What are the kids, interested in? What are their interests? What does their wife like? What does she like? Flowers? What kind of flowers, right? We track all of that. And then the AI will take that stuff and it'll actually incorporate it into the messages to make it personalized and meaningful, right? So, AI is something to embrace. If people don't embrace it, you're going to be in a challenge mode if you're selling or run a business and you're not utilizing it, because what AI will do is it will do routine tasks on a repetitive basis way better, way faster, way quicker than human beings can do it with way less cost. So if you're in a position today and you're listening to this and you're in a position where AI can make you routine, you got to do something. Because if you don't, it's just a matter of time when it makes it routine.
Yeah.
And I'm telling people like, I've been a setter forever in a sales organization. You better learn how to have the ability to communicate more than just setting a call. Because call Sirius Satellite XM, the radio company, they have somebody on the front end, some gal that they name the gal. She's amazing as a setter. It's crazy how good she is.
Yeah.
I just stayed in Las Vegas recently. I was
at her magic.
All of these AI set type programs or front end type program, agentic agents, if you will, on the front end.
Yeah.
What they can do is they can rationally talk to somebody and they can then make suggestions, recommendations. The Rio Hotel in Las Vegas, they have Rita, I think the name of the person. Hi, this is Rita, and I'm your AI assistant. And Rita can direct you to anything you want.
And she answers the phone?
She answers the phone. They don't even have a call center answering the phone anymore. It's just Rita. Yeah. And Rita will direct you to housekeeping. Rita will direct you to the front desk. Yeah. Rita will help you check in or check out if you need towels or whatever. You're not even speaking to housekeeping. Yeah. Rita takes care of all of this. And then 10 minutes later, right, knock on the door. Yeah. So if you're in a position where that can be augmented or replaced, got to look at that. There are certain businesses that are going to struggle with that because what will happen is, and you see this even like in grocery stores right now, like AI or self-checkout is just starting, right? But it's going to start recommending what you want. It's going to actually eventually track what you're buying on a regular basis and then say, hey, avocados are on sale here. Would you like us to bag some up and, debit your credit card and do this and do that? So all of these type of positions that are within any organization are going to start to get commoditized. And Same with workflow. If we have people who are doing standardized workflow on a regular basis, these AI agents or AI processes are going to be able to flatten that world.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that AI I don't think we'll ever get to, at least not in the next 5 years, I can say, is do what we're doing right now and read emotions. And so, complex selling, multi individual selling, I don't think that'll ever go out of style. And so what we've got to do is we got to upgrade our skill sets. Just like I'm sure there was probably a male talking to a male at this time just because of the time of life, but it could have been a daughter or son the father saying, son, daughter, learn how to fix this steam engine and we will be covered for generations, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not the case any longer. AI is moving at such a rapid pace that unlike the steam engine, it's not going to take, 50 years or whatever it took to get to the automobile to take before the steam engine was running into challenges. It's happening now. So that's my take on AI, and it's nothing to be feared. It's to be embraced.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that. And I completely agree. And we definitely need to be embracing it just to make our lives have more speed and agility, right? Whether it is for business, whether it is for your life. I mean, heck, the Jetsons, cartoons were so much more advanced than us. They would press buttons and their meals would come out, right?
That's right. That's right.
I used to love the Jetsons.
Me too.
But it's there was always desires and dreams, so and we looked at that as inspirational and aspirational, so therefore we should continue to do that now. So thanks, I love that. What do you think has changed over the last 15 years as it relates to sales, and what's coming that people aren't ready for yet in sales?
Well, I think there's several things, but certainly technology has changed. The biggest shift, and I said this is how old I am, folks. Back in 1999, I was saying this to people.
Yeah.
I said, this DSL, digital subscriber line, kind of like your first fast internet.
Yeah. DSL. Wow. Oh my gosh. AOL. Days of AOL.
Yeah. AOL after the dial-up phase, just starting to creep into when AOL, Netscape, and all of those companies came out. It started then. And I used to tell people back in 1999, this is going to change selling forever. And they said, you're crazy. And I said, no, think about this. They can now find information that they're relying upon us as the expert in the sales channel. So back then, you would bring a sales channel in to actually gain knowledge and expertise on what you're looking to purchase. You would rely heavily on that channel. That is so shifted. People told me I was nuts. And then it shifted before the pandemic, but during the pandemic and then now, the majority of a buying decision on a major opportunity is done pre-salesperson appointment.
Yeah.
So now they're bringing the salesperson. It's a very different similar conversation, but different.
Yes.
Because now they can know more. Well, I went to buy a new vehicle and I went in and I said to the salesperson, I said, on this model, my wife loves heated seats.
Yeah,
right?
I do too. Sorry. And I live in South Florida.
Okay. Well, we lived in northern Florida and she,
and
same
I still
thing.
wanted them during the winter.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And they're comfy. So I was like, look, I was on this model here on this level of the vehicle. Does it come with the heated and cooling seats? I said, I believe it does. And he goes, I have no idea. I said, no, it does. And he said, well, I have no idea. And I said, but it does. Look. And I had the info and he goes, oh, I didn't know that. And so that's an example, small example of I know more than the salesperson does.
Yeah.
Right. That's what's changed. Is a lot of times they'll know more about the sales that we're going to convey to them than we actually know. So now we've come not to an order taker level. We still have to be positioned as an expert and still positioned the way we were before, but the conversation's different. And that has changed a lot. I mean, Amazon, think about it. People used to have to go to local stores to buy this or that or this. They're not even thinking like that anymore. They're like putting stuff on autopilot to come in. Like I need paper towels every 30 days. Paper towels just come in, right?
Yeah.
And so all of that in selling has changed. What I don't think is ever going to change in selling, and I could be incorrect, I don't think I'll see it in the next 5 or 10 years, is the ability to communicate with another human being on complex subject matter and be able to read emotions and, things like that. I don't think it'll ever get there. And that's the advantage for people selling.
Yeah, I don't think so too. And I think there is going to be this leverage of people really looking for authenticity when it comes to larger decision making versus e-commerce is going to fly with the continuation of AI and like easy purchases and Amazon just getting that much better, going to a supermarket or having a recipe that you want to make, putting into something that really just creates a list for you, already has a checkout, maybe you just literally go pick it up or maybe it's delivered that same day. There's endless of things that are happening from the standpoint of making our lives easier. But I think when it comes to buying homes, like buying other things that are higher ticket, even B2B sales companies, whether they're in the turbine industry, whether in the chemicals industry, and so on and so forth, that kind of exchange will always need to have that one-to-one in the
Yes.
end. But the funnel of the lead generation will probably get a lot better and more efficient to really find out who your correct target audience is and communicate to them at the top of the funnel. But when it comes to that sign on the dotted line, there will need to be that personal conversation before.
Yeah, that ideal right fit buyer fit that
Yeah.
you're talking about, that AI is going to help dial that in. And the interesting part is the majority of people don't know that. They don't know their ideal right fit buyer. And that's what
Never.
causes
That's the foundational work no business ever does.
no, and it was just crazy because it's like, to me, we work a lot with ideal right fit buyer.
Yeah.
In the beginning of that, like right before we even do the metrics plan, we
Yes.
clear right fit buyer, because if right fit buyer is not accurate, then messaging's off,
And then
conversation.
you fail as a business in supporting them, which
Exactly.
happens a lot with marketers when, especially if there's agencies that only focus on digital, that only focus on social or so on and so forth, and they're not strategic in terms of like what I deliver. They're like, okay, to run a campaign for you is going to be this much. We'll develop the creative for you. And then the marketer says, who's your ideal customer profile?
Right.
Never ask that as a marketer. And when you do look at it, you got to make sure that you do a little bit of that strategy so that you survive as a marketer and retain that client and it doesn't backfire and they don't say, well, I've spent this money and I don't have a return on investment.
Right. And part of the reason is twofold. One, exactly what you're saying right now. Right. It's like they didn't qualify it up front who the ideal right fit buyer is. So they're generating leads, but they're marketing qualified at best. But they want a sales team to close them.
Yes.
And so they're not taking into consideration the connection between the marketing and sales on that component of it. And the second thing is they never investigate, actually, do they actually have a sales team who can close?
Yes.
And so what ends up happening for marketing companies, especially, is they'll generate leads. Even if they're qualified and the sales team can't close them, that owner of that company is not going to blame that sales team. They're going to blame the marketing company and disengage from their marketing.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Totally. This
Crazy.
has been, wow. I mean, Doug, what a fruitful, intellectual, like dropping such good nuggets of information in terms of how people need to be thinking about their sales process and moving through. I mean, we could go on for another hour, I feel.
I do too.
But I wanted to end with some, fun and ask you, some fireside questions. So whatever comes to mind, as we do with
Okay.
everybody, just, respond. What's one mistake in sales what's one mistake in your sales career you're grateful for today and why?
I'm grateful I tried so many things and didn't survive at all of them or thrive in all of them, because it taught me the power of resilience. And it's not that you get knocked down, that's the problem. It's the recovery time. So the quicker the recovery time in anything, whether that's a personal relationship or a business relationship, you're going to run into certain situations. They're designed by the universe. I'm convinced of that, to help us grow. And it's your recovery time. So that's what I've learned from it.
I like that. What's one book quote or principle you revisit when things get tough?
I keep rereading The Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And spoiler alert, Napoleon Hill didn't have a lot of money when he passed away. But the timeless principles of that book, it just, every time I read it, it talks about relationships, it talks about self-confidence, it talks about, working with others, it talks about, it's just primary principle. But the one quote that Russ Whitney said this to me one day. He said, Doug, when you get upset and you're outbound expressing your emotions,
Yeah.
most of the time that's like you drinking internal poisoning and hoping the other person dies.
Yeah.
So I come back to that quote very often because sometimes, like when we all get upset, and we all do as human beings, I ask myself, is this worth the poison I'm going to drink?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I love that. Finish the sentence. Sales is not about closing. Sales is really about
Helping others either solve a problem, gain an opportunity, or get a goal they're looking for.
I love it. I usually only do 3, but I do have one pressing question that I really like. I think you're going to answer amazingly. If you could write a note to every entrepreneur or founder starting out today, what would it say?
Wow, that one's a good one.
Yes,
If I
that's
could
why
write,
it was calling me to ask you.
if I could write a note to every person who's starting a business today,
What would it say?
there's so much there. So the first thing I would say is, until you get to $1 million, your only job is to focus on sales. Understand it's going to take you likely 2 to 3 times longer than you figure, cost you 2 to 3 times more than you figure. You're going to have ups times, down times, recover quickly from the down times, learn from them, capitalize on that. And then in the good times, put something away that gives you a cushion. So when the bad times come, you can go through that. And never, ever give up until you know in your heart that you can't make it, but be wise enough to understand the signs before then that give you the indication whether you should get out or stay in that process.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Doug, this has been amazing. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge and everything that you've shared, and really your success and everything that you've built. And thank you for sharing all of that with us. We really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very,
Yes.
very grateful.
Just as a side note to everybody listening, we're going to link all of Doug's connections on social so that you can get in touch, and the BitNose URL, so you can also check it out. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Doug. Thank you.